Aloha everyone, Maverick Mike here. Ikomamai, come on in, glad to have you. I'm going to be making my first pieces of furniture in this project, and it's not a matter of if I'm going to mess up, but just how bad. So let's just jump right on into this thing. So I did a quick sketch of what I envision these ottomans looking like. They're just going to be a basic box with a lid that's removable. I thought about putting hinges and cantilevering hinges and all that, but I'm just going to keep it simple and make a lid that can be completely removed. I envision an overall height of about 16 inches. Each side is going to be 18 inches with a height of about 12¼ inches. This thing's going to be on casters, which rolls around. So I don't know if this is right or whether it's going to work or not, but I'm going to be using a picture frame type joint right here with 45-degree glued together sections, reinforced with a corner reinforcement in here, glued in and possibly screwed in from the sides. And I think this is going to be strong enough because after all, it's just a box to put our feet up on. And on top of this lid there will be a pillow. So for this project I'll be making two ottomans, one for my wife and one for myself. On my wife's ottoman I envision putting some kind of flower or something like that and her name carved into the side. So here's the lumber I'm going to be using. It was stored under a house for the last 20 years, and they tell me it's something called bunky rye. I'm not exactly sure what it is, but it does feel like a hardwood. I cannot press my fingernail into this thing. And this is what the boards look like after 20 years under somebody's house. As you can see, they're kind of not in the best shape. However, some of them were fairly straight, and after I ran them through the plane, this is what they looked like. Kind of not bad, kind of a nice looking wood. So I finished all of my glue-ups and I've made a total of 6 of these panels, out of which I hope to be able to make 2 ottomans. Now that I have all these panels glued up, it's time to do an initial trim, and I want to get rid of this snipe, and I'm not sure if the camera's going to pick it up really well, but about 2¼ inches up from the end of the board, there's a line of snipe on each one of these. So I'm just going to trim this off nice and square above this line of snipe. Continuing with my initial trim operations, I already got my blade set at a 45-degree angle. I need to get rid of the outer edge, and I need to stay away from this joint right here. So someplace in the middle is where I want this 45-degree angle to come, and then I'll measure from this over from my 18 inches. Alright, I got the saw blade set to 90 degrees now. We're just going to go ahead and cut these panels out. Alright, so here's a panel. I'm looking at the back side of this thing and it looks really ugly. I know it's not going to be visible, but we're going to be reaching down in here. I may put something on the back here. I may put a thin veneer or something like that. All depends on what I happen to have lying around, so we'll deal with that later. But just looking at it, that's what I think I'm going to do. It's just ugly. Alright, so I have 8 of these side panels manufactured. So I have a couple problems. If you can name a wood fault, we have it in this pile, whether it's warped, twisted, bowed, cupped, you name it, it's all right here. So while they're very close, they're not going to be all exactly the same. Also, on this panel, while I was prepping, I dropped it. And now, this glue bond has come apart. And this panel can move. So I have to try to take this one apart. And if I can get it apart and re-glue it, great. If not, I'll have to make a brand new one for this. So we'll see what happens. Well, it came apart. And this glue, even though this thing has been drying for like 2 weeks, is not hard. Something funky has happened here. Yeah, this glue is still somewhat soft and pliable, so we're going to clean this up and re-glue this panel and see how it goes. Alright, let's glue this thing up again. Maybe I didn't have enough glue in this particular joint. Alright, this one. Oh, that's some serious overkill, man. Good night. Alright, to be continued, and we'll see if I actually successfully glued this to my workbench. Wouldn't that be fun? Alright, so I was scrounging around in the back, and I ran across a few of these pieces of plywood, veneer plywood, with a nice white finish on one side, and I think this nice finish would look good on the inside of the ottoman and also keep us from getting splinters. So if I have enough, and I think I might have enough of this stuff laying around, I'll go ahead and cut it in squares and I'll just glue it on the inside and it'll look nice. So also in the backyard, when I was scrounging around, I found this old dowel, and it's really rough. I mean, yeah, it's really rough. But if I cut this thing down the long way in half and then cut each of the halves down the long way again, I should end up with a nice 90-degree angle with a rounded edge that I can use for the corner reinforcements, and we'll see how that works. Alright, this doesn't look half bad. I kind of wish it was bigger, but we're going to use what we got. Going to run what we brought. Alright, that does not look half bad, and I think that we can use these in the corners. Nice. I went to my PC and whipped this up. Now my wife's name is Akwai, which means rose in Chinese. So Of course I had to make a rose cutout. Just looking at this thing, it's going to take me an awful long time to carve this out, and I'll probably have a long white beard before I'm done, so I'll just show a little bit of the starting. I have this 1/4-inch chisel. I really don't have any specific chisels for doing this job. I just have a general chisel. It's a 1/4-inch wide, and we're just going to go ahead and use this and take our time with it. So the blade on my 1/4-inch chisel is just too wide, so I just grabbed this old screwdriver and sharpened it down to a fine point and narrowed the blade a bit, so it's about 1/8 of an inch now. And I had to do that because the letters are just really thin, and there was a lot more curves to it, and I just couldn't do everything fine enough with a 1/4-inch. So I'm just using the pencil to color in the lines so that I can more easily see what material I have to remove later on when I've removed the paper. Alright, I think I'm done here. I've got everything kind of penciled in, so let's pull this paper off and see how it looks. Alright, so we have our outline. So what I'm planning on doing is the dark colored areas. I'm planning on gouging those out. Not sure whether I'm going to go to a consistent depth yet or not, or just let it go where the wood wants to go. We'll see. Here's the roughed in finished product, and I'm quite happy with it. I haven't done any sanding to it or anything like that, and in fact I may actually leave the inside of here rough. I kind of like the look. Anyway, I'm finished with this one, and I really enjoyed doing this. I was able to get into a nice, quiet, peaceful frame of mind, and I very much enjoyed it, so I decided to do another panel. So this will be the next one, and I think this will be the last one that I make for her ottoman. But who can find a virtuous woman? For her price is far above rubies. That's from Proverbs 31:10, and it describes my lovely wife perfectly. Finished doing the outline. Let's go ahead and peel this off and see how it looks. Now let's carve these dark areas out and see how it looks. Let's go ahead and do an initial sanding. Now let's sand this other panel. Got a fresh piece of 220 grit on my sander here, and we're just going to go ahead and sand off all these smudges and all these marks. Alright, let's try to glue this thing up. So this is set all night and the glue is not dry yet, so I just put this thing out in the sun for a while and we'll come back to it later. In the meantime, we're going to get the lumber for the bottom and the top prepped. So this is going to be the bottom, and we're just going to prep this by removing one edge over here and give us a nice flat working area. And then we'll make all of our measurements off of that trimmed piece. Alright, I'm going to square this up using our true edge. And let's make a cut. We're doing this to get rid of the snipe. And now this is basically ready for the box to be set upon it, and then we can draw out the lines for the bottom. This has been out in the sun all day, so the glue should be dry by now. I'm going to go ahead and take off the bottom alignment brackets for these. I'm going to leave the top ones on for right now. And then I'm going to move this on top of the the base and then draw the lines out. I've aligned 2 of the edges, and now I'm just going to run a pencil on the other 2 edges, and we'll be ready to cut out the bottom. Next, I'm going to remove the top corner clamps, flip this thing over, and then mark the top. So as I was going to put this box together, I realized I don't have any corner clamps. So if you're curious, I went ahead and whipped these up really quick. This is just a triangle with the edge cut off, 45 degrees. 1032 nut, screw, and a bunch of L brackets that I had laying around here. Tapped it out, ran the screw through there. So those nuts are just for a little bit of extra area to push against the wood, hold it in place. And that's what I used to make this with. I just whipped it up in an afternoon. I made enough to do the box, and I don't even know why I'm doing this. I'm not going to put this in here. Bottom side. Real simple. In and out. Nothing fancy, but it did the job of putting the box together. Alright, we're going to mark the lid now. I'm using this one good edge on this outer side here, and I've marked pencil mark 5/16 of an inch on the way in, and I'm just going to mark the rest of the box all the way around, and then I'll come out 5/16 all the way around the box and then be able to cut that out. So I put everything together to get a rough idea of how it's looking. And originally I envisioned this coming out even with the bottom here, and then this top lid overhanging a little bit with rounded edges. And on the front and on the back, it would look okay. Like this. I would be happy with that. However, I'm not happy with how the sides look. So looking at it from the side, I've decided to get rid of this ugliness. I'm just going to go ahead and put trim all the way around the top of the box, like this, which will also hold the lid in place. And also on the bottom, I'll put trim down here like this, just to make this look more polished and more finished. So the next steps will be to go ahead and sand the top and the bottom, bring them down to a close to finished appearance, and then proceed from there. Alright, I have to prep some more lumber to make the trim. What I'm going to do is I'm going to completely get rid of the grooves in this hardwood flooring so that it's smooth on both sides, and then I'll make the trim pieces out of them. So I finished running my trim pieces through the thickness planer, and now I'm going to be removing the tongue and groove on this thing. Alright, prepping the top trim. I just brought this over to the miter station, cut a 45 here. Just going to line up the edges right with the corner. Make sure it's nicely aligned. I'm going to come over here and just scribe a line on the other side. And I'll just scribe a 45-degree line over here. Take it to the miter saw and go ahead and cut this out. Time to glue up the box to the base. And let's just weight this thing down for the night. So I'm going to turn my attention back to the top. When I did the glue up, I made the trim coming around the edges proud of the surface. So I'm going to have to go ahead and sand these down so that they're even. And then I'm going to go ahead and route them. All right, let's put a round over on the top edges. Wow. So this is all I've got left to try to put some trim on the inside here. It's a little ugly, but the main thing is I want to keep anybody from getting any splinters on this lumber here. So I am going to put it in. It's going to be ugly, but this is the last of my supply, and I guess I don't have enough to make two. Oh well. For the interior trim, I'm going to do something that has a little more style and is a little more elegant than just an angle like this. I'm going to go ahead and make a little corner bracket that's going to sit on top of the bracing like this. And I'm also going to use one of these 1/4 inserts in here, something like that, to be able to adjust for the top. The top was solid, but after I put the new bottom in, the top rocks a little bit and makes some noise. Alright, I'm going to sand these down, and this is going to take a while. It's all going to be done by hand, and I kind of wish I had a drum sander and things of that nature, but I don't, so this is what I'm going to do. Alright, marking these cutouts. Time to put the inner trim into place. Let's go ahead and glue this up. Now that this upper trim glue has set, the next steps will be to go ahead and sand this down so that it's flush with the top surface here. And after that, I'm going to go ahead and use my router with a round over bit and go along all of the edges, both inside and out. I also want to route this edge and put a round over on it, but I want the bottom portion to remain flat and square up to the point where these bottom trim pieces come together. So I'm thinking maybe a 1/4 inch or 1/8 of an inch from the top of the trim up will be rounded. So I have to figure out how to do that. I don't think I'm good enough to do it by hand. I may have to make a stop or something like that. Alright, I'm getting set up to put the round over on this inner edge. And I just thought that this was too narrow and too easy to tip, so I just put this extra 2x4 out here with a couple of clamps to give me a little bit more stability on the router. Okay, now I've finished routing the inner edge. I have to do the outer edge. And I don't really have a good way of extending the inner edge so that I don't rock with the router. So I'm going to do something on the outside. I'm going to use that same piece of lumber. I'm just going to add some spacers on the thing and then clamp it into place and see if I can run the bit between this edge and this edge with a spacer in between. Okay, I've got my spacer set up, and let's see if this is going to fit and if this is going to work. I believe that's going to work. It'd be a lot better than me just trying to freehand this thing. Let's try it and see how it comes out. Alright, not bad. It just needs some finish sanding. No big divots, so I'm pretty happy with that. Alright, I got the box flat on the bench. I am just going to go ahead and place the bottom trim up where it's going to be. And I'm just going to make a little mark. So maybe 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch up from here is where I need to stop my route, because I want to route this whole edge right here. But like I said before, I want to keep this corner so that there's no gap right here. So I'm going to use my same jig and just one of these little legs here. I'm going to use as a stop. So I measured up 1/4 inch from where my trim was, put the block right there on that spot, and I'm just going to go ahead and route this up, and I should have a consistent stop right here. Then I'll take it off and finish the top. Going to start off with a fresh 220 grit sandpaper, and then I'll finish with a 220 by hand. So here's my setup to glue the bottom trim pieces on. I didn't really have the right clamps and things to do it, so I just attached some lumber to the top of my table here. A couple of 2x4s, a couple of pieces of plywood, screwed them down, bigger than what the box is. I've laid out all the pieces to get glued up, and then I have some spacers and some wedges ready to pound in. Alright, let's do this glue up. I got some tape around the box so that the glue doesn't come up past it, but we're going to go ahead and start gluing everything up here. Let's do the final sanding on this lid. I got a fresh piece of 120 grit sandpaper on my DA sander. I'm going to go 120, I'm going to go 220, and then I'm going to go by hand with 220 and finish up. Time for some hand sanding, 220 grit on a nice flat block. Now it's time to put a finish on the inside of the top. It's just going to be white paint out of a rattle can. Alright, so this is what I'm going to be using on the exterior of the box. I'm going to be using this because I have it. And it's good. I like it. Varathane Ultimate Polyurethane, water-based. And it's really good stuff, and I've used it a few times and I really enjoy using it. While our first coat of clear is drying on the top, I'm going to go ahead and remove this and get this box ready to work on. Alright, that tape did a pretty good job of keeping the glue down below the surface of the trim. So now I'm going to go ahead and round these corners over. I'm going to do it by hand. I'm going to do it with a piece of 120 grit sandpaper on my sanding block. And then we're going to go all around, and afterwards we're going to come back and we're going to fix places that have gaps like this. Alright, I've got the top of the box taped off, and I'm going to go ahead and put another coat of white on the inside. I went ahead and buffed it out a little bit more and sanded some things down, and now we're just going to go ahead and put a second coat of white in here. Alright, here's an extreme close-up view of a gap on the corner of the box that I need to repair. There's some gaps here that are just too egregious for me and I want to fix. So we're going to go ahead and fix this. I'm just going to be using super glue and some sawdust from my DA sander to go ahead and fix this gap. Alright, so the first thing I'm going to do is run a line of tape just to prevent any really big boo-boos from happening. I'm going to take some super glue and just try to get as much of it inside the gap as I can. And I'm going to use a toothpick as a kind of a little squeegee to force it into the gap as much as I can and clean up the excess. I'm just going to put some sawdust on here from my DA sander and try to put it into the gap as much as I can. I don't want all this stuff sticking to my fingers. A little squeegee action with my toothpick. Now I'm just going to leave it alone. Pull the tape off, and then afterwards I'll come back and sand this. Alright, so here's the repair. It's set up overnight. I'm just going to go ahead and grab some 220 grit sandpaper, sand this down, and we'll see how that ends up looking there. Alright, that big gap that was right there is plugged up and looks like it's usable. Alright, let's do a final sanding by hand with 220 grit, and then we're going to go ahead and put clear coats on this. Here we go. Alright, let's put our threaded inserts in that I'm going to be using to level the top with. Alright, I put a little note on the bottom, and now it's time to put the finish on it. Alright, time to put the casters on. So I didn't want these casters to stick past the edges, so I just spaced it back an inch from each end. Time to put the top on and level it out using our threaded inserts. That could come up a little bit, and that could come up a little bit. This can come up. This can come up. This one could come up just a little bit. This one up just a little bit. Okay, all solid.